Hi there, it's Jen from Jen's Homemadeology, and today we are going to be making the Cascade Duffle from Boo and Lou Patterns. This duffel bag is a completely customizable duffel, as it has 3 color blocking options for the long panels, along with a plain long version. It also has different pockets of which you can customize and choose your pockets of what you want to do. There's the flat pockets, which you can put on the exterior or the interior, along with the elastic pockets. That can also be done on the exterior, interior. Zipper pocket for the long panels that you can do on your interior, exterior. And then there is this everything panel, which I did the full size. So on the full, there's the flat pocket and the elastic pocket. If you are doing the mid size, you choose either or of those. And then you also have a phone pocket and then your key ring, along with your zipper pocket on the everything panel. Nice big spacious bag, especially for the full size. I cover one of each of the type of pockets so you can see how to make them all. There's the top closure for the flap. I did put 2 zippers on mine since I use zipper by the yard. There's an option to add grab handles, and you can either make them folded like this for easy grabbing, or you can leave them flat. I did use webbing for mine, but there are steps in the pattern to make handles, and I do briefly walk through that, though I don't make the handles in mine. There's also the option to make the crossbody sling that comes with a cute little padded adjustable sleeve. There's that. Can be removed. And this is the duffel that we will be making today in the tutorial. I do only make the plain basic version, so that way this tutorial is easier to follow along no matter what version you are making. If you would like to see one of the color blocking options made, go ahead and comment down below, and I will go ahead and work on getting that color block for you. For color block options, there's a rainbow, a stripe, and then a blocked version. So let's go ahead and walk through our supplies and materials needed in order to make this bag before we get sewing. Now we're going to walk through our supplies and materials needed in order to make the Cascade duffel bag. It can differ depending on which version you're doing, as far as if you're doing a basic panel like I am, or if you're going to do one of the color blocking options, and then also depending on what type of pockets you are doing around. So let's walk through those. First up, you'll need 2 long panels if you're doing a basic one like I am. This is the front and the back panel, or you can do a color blocking option, and those are as followed. You would have a rainbow color block, which you would have the 5 pieces, or a striped color block, which also has 5 pieces, or you can have a block color block, which has 4 pieces, and those are per panel. So if you do just like the front panel with one of these options, then you have 5. But if you wanted to do the front and the back panel, then you would have double of each of those pieces. So I'm just doing the basic. So I have a basic long panel for my front and a basic for my back. For this, I'm using a waterproof canvas. This one doesn't have a coating on it though, so I am going to interface it just to give it a little bit more structure for what I'm looking for. And then you'll need 2 long side linings. For this, I am using a nylon ripstop. And then you'll need 2 short sides of your main. and 2 short side linings. And then your main base exterior. It's just a black waterproof canvas. This one does have a coating on it. So I'm going to use a self-adhesive stabilizer to give my base some structure. And then your base lining. And your top piece A, along with your top piece A lining. These 2 pieces together make the flap opening. Your top piece B, which is your main exterior fabric, along with your top piece lining B. So this is the outer part of the flap, so the flap will go in the middle of this. Okay. And on all the makes, you will need 4 pieces of zipper tab. These will go on your ends of your top zipper around the top opening. Now, if you were to do just a very basic bag with no pockets, you would have these pieces, which are all off a cut list. And then you would only need 2 of the pattern pieces, which would be your top piece A and your top piece B's. And those are a on the fold pattern piece. And to keep in line with just queuing a basic bag real quick, your zipper, which the zipper length can be found on page 32, and you can choose the size that you're doing. And then I'm going to do 2 pulls for it so that I can open around, but you can just do 1. So if you're doing zipper pockets, you will need 2 zipper pocket linings per zipper, plus the zipper per length with a pull. So this will make a zipper pocket. And then it will also be recommended to print out the zipper pocket placement, so that way you can get your box opening to line up on your lining. But the sizes for these pieces can be found on the cut chart. And then if you are doing any short side flat pockets, whether on the exterior or the lining, you will need 2 pieces per pocket. So I have 2 exterior fabrics and 2 lining fabrics per pocket. These are going to be my ones for my exterior. And then if you are doing any elastic pockets, like I'm going to do a short elastic pocket, you'll need 2 pieces per pocket. So these are 2 pieces for the short elastic pocket, along with a piece of elastic that's 3/8 of an inch, measurement off the cut list. And then if you are doing the everything pocket, the pockets for those, if you are doing the full size like I am, you'll have all of the pocket options. If you're doing the mid size, you'll either pick the elastic pocket or you'll pick the flat pocket, but I'm doing both since it's the full size. So you'll need your 2 pieces of your everything pocket with your elastic. You'll need your 2 pieces of your flat pocket. I'm going to use my exterior fabric for this since it was a thinner fabric, and it will help pull in the colors to inside. And 2 pieces for your D-ring, and then 2 pieces of fabric for your phone pocket. Now the phone pocket piece is an actual pattern piece to cut versus off the cut list, so that way you can grab your phone and see if it fits inside of those dashed lines. And then if you are doing the everything pocket and you're doing the little D-ring connector for your keys, then you will need a little D-ring, 1 inch. And if you are doing D-ring connectors on the side of your bags to use the sling strap, you'll need 4 pieces of D-ring tab with 2 D-rings. And then if you are making a strap, you have the option to make a strap padding. So you would need strap padding A and then the strap padding piece B. You'll cut 2 pieces of your main fabric, or you can do a main and a lining, and then you'll also need an interfacing, which I'll walk through that when I walk through my interfacings. And then you'll need 2 pieces of your B, and then these 2 pieces together will make it strap onto the strap for padding. And then if you are going to do the strap pad for the crossbody, then you'll need your strap. I'm going to use the 1.5 inch webbing option. You can cut your fabric and make your strap. You also need 2 swivel hooks that are 1.5 inch, along with a 1.5 inch slider. Now there is an option to do grab handles. You can either do them out of fabric or 1.5 inch webbing. I'm going to use 2 pieces of 1.5 inch webbing. Now that we walk through our pattern pieces and some of the supplies, let's go ahead and walk through some of the interfacing for the Cascade. Now, there isn't any really right or wrong way to interface this bag. It just depends on your materials and also the type of structure that you are looking for in your bag. I'm using a waterproof canvas on my for the exterior fabric that does not have any of the coating that could melt when I interface. So I chose a fusible fleece for it. So I have 2 for my long exteriors. I have 2 for my short sides. And I have 1 for the flap part. And then also 1 for the outer flat part. These are all cut 3/8 of an inch shorter all the way around than the pattern pieces themselves. That will leave room for your seam allowance and not make your seams any bulkier. For my bottom piece, to add a little extra structure to the bag, I'm using a self-adhesive foam. It's also partially because I used a different waterproof canvas on the bottom, and that did have a coating, and I don't want to melt that coating when I'm applying interfacing, and just using a self-adhesive for me is so much easier. And then if you were using cotton woven for any of your bags, please interface that with SF101 throughout the whole bag to give your fabric that support. And then go ahead picking out a interfacing / stabilizer to give the bag structure from there. I'm going to go ahead and adhere my fleece so then we can go ahead and start sewing. Now that we're going to get started sewing, I'm actually going to skip all the way down to page 49, which has us starting to do our zipper pockets. And that's because in this tutorial, I'm not going to do the wet bag that is covered or any of the exterior panel options of like the rainbow, the stripes, or the color blocking, to make this tutorial easier to follow along with. Because if I did all the options, I fear that people would get a little lost and confused. So if you are looking for one of the color block options for panels, you can comment in the comment section and let me know which of the panels that you would like to see sewn up, and I can definitely do a tutorial on how to sew those. But this way, the tutorial overall will help you get the structure of the bag and how to put the bag together. I'm going to start off with our zipper pockets. You'll grab your 2 linings, and this process will be the same for any zipper pocket you're doing, whether it's on the exterior or the interior. And this is also would be the same process for the zipper pocket that's on the everything panel, which is actually the zipper that I'm going to be doing. place my zipper pocket linings off to the side real quick. And you'll grab one of your long side linings for your interior or exterior, whatever panel that you want that zipper to be on. You're gonna grab one of those long pieces, and at the top edge, top long edge, find your center point. If you like, you can also make a memory crease down the side. And with this right side up, so your panel right side up, take one of your zipper pocket linings and place that right side down so that they are right sides together. You'll find the middle top of your zipper pocket lining 2. That you can match those center points. And then you want to have the zipper lining 1 1/4 inch down from the top edge of your panel. Tape it in place. You can pin it, though if you're doing this on your exterior fabric and you have vinyl, you will not want to pin it in place. And once you have your lining on, you can grab your little pattern piece and align that up with the top edge of your pocket lining. Now you can do this before you attached it or pinned it on, or you can do it now. And you're going to trace on this zipper box. Now I just like to take the corners and poke through my pattern piece so that I can get my points. And then I'll take a ruler and go across them. So I'm gonna mark in those holes with a erasable pen. And I can remove this piece and then draw my lines. So now I've transferred my markings to my wrong side of my lining. Again, my main panel is right side up. My lining to my zipper pocket is wrong side up, so that right sides are together. Along the top edge, my zipper lining is 1 1/4 inch down from the edge, and I traced on that zipper box. Now I'm going to sew from point to point, back tacking at the start and the finish of each row for my top line and my bottom. In the instructions, it does have you making that complete box. However, I've never had good luck with having a nice smooth zipper box by sewing along those two short edges. I like to leave those short ends unsewn, so when I have my triangles, they can lay back nicer. I'm gonna go ahead and sew along these two lines again, stopping and starting reinforcing with back tacking at the start of those. Pick up my needle, drop it down in the other start of the line. So I just picked up and dragged my needle. I can cut away that little side piece. Now you can remove your pins or your tape that was holding your panel in place. And once you're happy with your stitching, you're gonna take a pair of scissors or a seam ripper and cut down the middle of your lines, and this will open up your zipper box, and you'll be cutting through both your fabrics. I'll get down, and you'll leave that triangle bit at the end, and you want to cut as close as you can to your stitch lines without going through them. Now you can turn your zipper pocket lining through the lining opening, and you'll give that a press. I'm gonna go ahead and go over to my iron and give this a press so that the lining stays back. Here is the panel pressed. And then on your wrong side of it, you will see that your lining is a pocket lining, and your lining are wrong sides together. So when you're looking at the back side, this would be the right, and then this would be the wrong of your fabric. Now for the zipper, so you take your zipper to your zipper box and then a pull. I'm using zipper by the yard, so I could cut my zipper to whatever length I want it, and the pull is off of it because I cut into my tape. I am gonna singe it. You can use a lighter. This will just help the zipper tape from not fraying and raveling. I'm gonna slip my pull on. I'm gonna take my side that has the lowest tooth, separate this side that had the lowest will be the side that I put into my zipper pull first, and then match up to where the other tooth is just right behind it. And then a tip for helping you get your zipper in would be to line the top and bottom edge of your zipper with double-sided tape. This will help hold it in place for you during positioning and sewing. And then you can change the direction of whether your zipper will close to the left or to the right. That just depends on which way your pull is facing. Keep your zipper pull out of the area. And now you can match your zipper lining start along your zipper and match that within that window. And you want to center your zipper tape so that the zipper is in the middle of the box. And then once centered, you can sew around your box with a 1/8 seam allowance. Make sure that your lining are all facing down. And then when I start my stitching, I'm going to leave long tails. So I'm going to pull my strings through and knot them off at the back for a cleaner finish versus back tacking. And it can help to use a zipper foot along the zipper. When you get to your zipper pull, you can move it out of the way by leaving your needle down, lifting up your pressure foot, and then sliding your pull. And make sure you re-put your pressure foot back down before you continue sewing. I'm going to pull those through right now. I'm going to stop in that very same first stitch and then leave a long tail to pull through. Okay, and then I'm going to knot this off, and you can use some fabric tack to help give it a little extra security too. Okay, so there's our zipper pocket front. Now to add the lining to close up our pocket. Now you'll grab your other piece of zipper pocket lining and have that right side up, and you'll lay your pocket on top of it so that your zipper pocket linings are both right sides together, leaving out your panel. You'll clip around, matching up your zipper pocket lining. So that when you do flip to the other side, that your pocket linings are right sides together. You'll see the wrong side of your zipper pocket and your your panel. Now once you have that flipped around, we can sew. We're gonna sew our zipper pocket shut. If you would like, you can trim any remaining zipper that wasn't inside your zipper box out of your seam allowance. That will make it an easier sew if your machine has trouble getting over zippers. I'm going to singe the zipper tape again just because I cut into it. I'm going to sew around with a 3/8 seam allowance. anytime you're sewing, make sure that you're keeping that main panel out of the way. There would be our zipper pocket. Pocket now. And now this process is the same for any of the zipper pockets that you will be doing. So if you are doing more than one zipper pocket, make sure that you go ahead and repeat these steps before moving on. Now moving on to our flat pocket. If you are not going to sew any flat pockets, go ahead and skip on to the elastic pocket if you are doing those. Those steps will start picking up on page 58. Any flat pockets, the steps are the same for a full or short, and whether or not you're doing it on the exterior or interior, these are going to be exterior pockets for me. However, if you are doing a flat pocket on the everything panel, those steps will be different, and we'll make that later. I'm going to show you my short side pockets. Taking a piece of our exterior and then aligning and then placing those right sides together along the top edge. In this case, the top long edge. Sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. And then you'll trim your seam allowance in half. And then turn right side out. If you would like, you can leave a little bit of your lining fabric sticking up versus pressing it completely back to add a little extra pop of color. Noting that if you do leave that little bit of extra, that your lining will be shorter than the panel than if you were to press it completely. And that will be fine because that little bit will still get caught within your seam allowance. Well, that is about how it would look with the little extra pop of color. Just gonna press mine all the way down, however. And then once pressed well, whether or not you want it the little extra hanging out or not, once that is pressed, you can top stitch. I'm going to top stitch with a 1/8. Now with your pockets, you can always add a cute little applique on them. And once your panels are top stitched, depending on where you're putting your flat pocket, like this is my flat pocket for my exterior short panel. I'm going to grab one of my exterior short panels and place that right side up and my pocket right side up and match along my sides and my bottom so that I can base this in place. Go around and base this in place with a 1/8 seam allowance, sewing across the sides and the bottom. you can either leave this as a big pocket, or you can make them into a divided pocket. You can make them as whatever size that you want. If you do divided pockets, I'm just gonna split straight down the middle, make a little memory crease, and then sew up by doing a back tacking at the start and the finish. That with my two slip pockets. Now you'll repeat this process with any other slip pockets that you have. I do have one more flat slip pocket to do, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that one. And then here are my two panels for my sides. I'm going to place those off to the side and work on sewing an elastic pocket. If you are not sewing an elastic panel, you can skip off to where the everything panel starts. If you're making one of those, which is on page 64, I'm going to show how to do an elastic pocket. I am doing a short side one on the interior lining, but the steps are the same for all elastic pockets, whether they are on the long or short or exterior or interior. However, these are not the steps for the elastic pocket that's on the everything panel. And you'll take your two pieces of lining or fabric for your elastic pocket, and then I'm going to place my elastic off to the side real quick, and then with your fabrics right sides together, go ahead and clip along your long top edge. So then we can sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. I'm going to turn this fabric right side out and give it a nice good press. Now that edge is pressed, we're going to top stitch along with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and this will be to make room for your elastic. Okay, now for this next part, you want to make sure that you're leaving long tails to help pull your gathers together. We're gonna make gathers at the bottom edge of our fabric to help it fit into the panel. We're gonna make 2 rows. The first row 1/8 of an inch away from the bottom, and then the second row 1/4 of an inch away from the bottom. And you're not back tacking because you want to be able to pull those threads, and you want to have your longest stitch length that you can for just a simple basting stitch. And then leave long tails again on the other end. And now this one will be 1/4 of an inch away. And leaving those tails. I'll have that. Take your elastic that's cut for this panel, using one of these little thingies or a safety pin. You can thread your elastic through the top edge of the pocket. You just want to make sure that once your elastic starts getting short, that you don't pull it too far past and suck your elastic all the way in. You're going to get it until it's flushed with your panel first. And then sew in place. You're going to sew across here a few times to give it some security. And then you can finish threading through your elastic. And then we're gonna have this the same. I'm gonna sew this to where the elastic is just flushed with our fabric. And then sew back and forth a few times to secure it in place. And hold each end of my elastic and then pull on my pocket taut and then let it go, and it should evenly crinkle. Now, whatever panel you are planning on attaching this to, go ahead and grab one of those. Mine is a short side interior, so this is one of my side panel, the short side panel interiors. And you can, if you want, you can find the middle of your pocket and then the middle of the panel and match those, just to ensure that you're gathering the same throughout the panel. And then you'll take your panel right side up and your pocket right side up and match that point. And then you can pull your bobbin threads so that they gather. And you'll get your pocket the same size as your panel. I'll do that for the side too. Once you got the bottom all gathered and portioned in the panel, you can go ahead and clip up your sides along the panel too. And you can go around and baste in place. And then you can fold your panel in half to make sure that your stopping and starting points of your elastic is the same. And you can trim off your basting stitches. You can also fully remove those if you would want for the gathering ones. And just leave mine in. Now, if you would like, just like with the other panels, you can make a divider pocket out of these. Making sure you tack at the start and finish. And then you do want to make sure that you also get the top of the elastic in there too. And there will be your divider pockets. And then you'll repeat this process with any other elastic pockets that you have. And place this one off to the side. And we will start working on our everything panel. Now moving on to the everything panel. On page 64, there is a layout of everything. If you're doing the full size, then you'll have a flat pocket, a foam pocket, a key ring, and then an elastic pocket. If you are doing the mid size, you get to pick between having a flat pocket or an elastic pocket. And then our zipper was done in our previous step in the beginning of the video. If you are not doing the everything panel, then you will skip to assembly of the top panel on page 89. And then for your panel that will have your everything panel on it, make sure that you're interfacing on the back of it in between your pocket lining. This will help give support to your lining of all the pockets. And then you'll take your zipper pocket lining and fold that up over to keep it out of your sewing area. I like to pin mine to the top. That's the way you don't sew through your zipper lining. So there's the back side with my piece of interfacing, my zipper pocket lining that's up out of the way. And then again, if you haven't already done so on your panel that you have your everything pocket, if you haven't done your zipper, go ahead and do so now. Push this off to the side real quick as we assemble our other pockets. Take your phone pocket pieces. Make sure that you've ensured that your phone will fit inside of the pocket piece. So with the dotted lines, and place those right sides together. And for the most part, you're going to sew completely around this. However, on one side, you are going to leave a birthing gap. I'm going to go ahead and sew, and you'll have a 3/8 seam allowance. I'm going to start at where I'm going to have my birthing area. I'm going to do a little L stitch. This will help me line up my seams later and reinforce that birthing area. And then I'm going to sew around with a 3/8 seam allowance. Now we're going to clip our seam allowance corners. Make sure that you don't snip into your stitches. And then you can birth through that opening. And then you'll give it a press, and then we can top stitch around with a 1/4 seam allowance all the way around, and that will close up your birthing gap. So there's that, and it'll be ready to attach to our panel. Now we are going to set this off to the side so we can get the rest of the things made. And then for your D-ring tab, you'll take your 2 pieces of D-ring fabric and have those right sides together. We're going to clip around one of the short ends and then 2 of the long ends, and sew around with a 3/8 seam allowance. And you'll cut off those top corners. Make sure not to cut into any of your seams or your stitches. And then birth through that bottom opening. And then if you were using a fraying material, you can sew across this raw edge with a zigzag stitch. And you can turn your D-ring tab side on your D-ring and bring up your fabric. And have that until about 1/4 of an inch away from the top of your edge. And then you can sew 1/8 of an inch away from this raw edge with a short straight stitch, back tacking at the beginning and the end. And then you'll ensure that none of your short edges stick out from the sides. So, and there's that, and that'll be ready to attach to your panel. Now for your flat everything panel pocket, if you are not doing the flat pocket and doing just the elastic pocket for the mid-size, then you can skip over these steps. I'm going to place these right sides together. If you have a fabric that you would like as your exterior, make sure that that is your top fabric. And then clip along your left-hand side. And the top, and we're going to sew along our left and the top with a 3/8 seam allowance. Snip on that corner. And then turn out. Okay, and give this a nice press, and then top stitch the top edge only with a 1/8 seam allowance. Place this off to the side and work on your elastic pocket. If you are sewing the mid-size and just chose to do the flat pocket, then you are ready to assemble your pocket. But I need the elastic pocket first since I'm doing the full size. So here's our elastic pocket linings along with our elastic. Now, if you have fabrics that you have a right and a wrong side for, then your right side fabric, the one that you want showing from the pocket, like I did with this one, that will be your first piece that you grab. You'll have it wrong side up, so this will be a wrong side. This is the right side. And on the right side, we're gonna fold back 3/8 of an inch. Then on the opposite panel, your lining piece of it, and have that wrong side up, and then fold 3/8 of an inch on the left hand side. And fold that in. So lining left side, exterior, fold on the right side. Now matching them now right sides together. Here's my main, here's my lining. Right sides now are going to be together, matching up those folds. Clip along the top edge. I'm going to fold it edges right sides together, matched along my top edge, and I'm going to sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. I'm going to turn this right side out, pressing along the top edge. So you'll have one raw edge and then you'll have that folded edge. Actually, I'm gonna fold these little corners in. Right, now along this top edge, we're gonna top stitch with a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And we're gonna top stitch down this folded edge with a 1/4 seam allowance, starting at the 1/2 inch mark. So right here is our 1/2 inch stitching. We're gonna start there and top stitch down that 1/4. Make sure you back tack at the start. And now we'll do our basting gathering stitches. So we'll sew 1/8 of an inch from the bottom edge, and we'll come back and sew 1/4 of an inch from the bottom edge. You want to make sure you're leaving some long tails so it'll help you pull for gathering. And then end with long ones. And back and sew that 1/4 of an inch one, again long tails. Do not back tack at the start or the finish. Long tails again. And taking your piece of elastic and your threader or your safety pin, inserting that. Oh, it helped to insert from your side with the folded edges. And you're again just going to pull your elastic till it's just barely there. Now this one you don't want it exactly flushed with it. You're gonna tuck it in about 1/8 of an inch so it doesn't stick out, but that you can definitely catch it with that 1/4 seam allowance. And then that ended up catching our seam allowance from joining that seam, and you can just barely see it when you're looking in, but it got caught with that seam allowance. Okay, and then finish threading through your elastic. Aside, you can go ahead and sew it. Again, back tacking over it a few times to hold in place. That, and again, you can stretch this panel and then let it go, and that should make your panel crinkling easily over the top. Now there are sizes for how big your bottom panel should be that are in step 73 on page 77. If you are doing the full size, yes, the pocket is narrower than the mid size, and that's because you have more to fit in on the panel than you did on the mid, since on the full size you have both the elastic and the flat pocket. You're going to take your gatherings and gather your pocket to match that size. And then this is what your pocket will look like once you have it to that measurement, and have the gathers about all the same throughout. Have your folded seam over here, and then your raw edge in here. And then that will be ready to attach to your panel. Assembly for the mid-size is on page 78. I'm gonna skip to page 83 for the full size. And all our pieces that we just made. And then our panel. Ensure that your zipper pocket is up out of that way. I'm gonna take your flat pocket and match up the raw edges to the bottom and side of the panel. And we can base this on with a 1/8 seam allowance, just along that bottom and the side. Now that our flat pocket is basted around the side and the bottom, we're gonna top stitch along this one side to connect it to our panel, back stitching at the start and the finish of our line. I'm gonna top stitch using a 1/8 seam allowance. Then you can either use a rivet if you have them to reinforce the seam, or you can make a little diagonal stitch. There is your flat pocket. Now for our elastic pocket. If you're doing the mid and you only did your flat pocket, then you wouldn't do this step. Here is our elastic pocket. Here is the edge that had those folded edges, so that's going to go towards the center of your pocket, and the raw edge side is going to match towards the bottom right. And you'll clip up along your raw edge first. And you can clip along the bottom gathered. Now you're going to baste down your raw edge and then along the gathers, basting with a 1/8 seam allowance. And there's your basted on elastic pocket. Now we're gonna sew up the folded edge seam of our elastic pocket to fully connect it to our panel. We're gonna sew with a 1/8 seam allowance, again back tacking at the start and finish of our sewing. And again, you can sew a little triangle stitch to reinforce the seam. Once your pocket is secure, you can then grab your phone sleeve pocket and your key ring, and then position them however you would like within the remaining part of your panel. And then pin or tape them in place. We're going to sew on our key ring first by making a rectangle around the top of the tab. I'm going to start on the top seam, and then I'm going to sew when I come down along my side and then go back across the tab. I'm going to sew over my previous stitching. And then to reinforce more, you can do an optional box stitch across your rectangle. Okay, so then there's that, and then we can stitch on our phone case with doing a 1/8 seam allowance around the side, the bottom, and back up the side, making sure to leave that top area open, and back tacking at the start and the finish. And then there's that, and you can remove your pins if you have any remaining. Your phone pocket, your flat pocket, and then your elastic pocket along with your key ring. Now that we've top stitched around our phone pocket, you can go in and do those diagonal stitchings to make your triangles for reinforcement. There's a phone pocket, and I can give this a press, help it uncrinkle from the folding to get under my machine. And then you can also give your elastic pocket a press with some steam to help it resituate itself if it's stretched during sewing. And I can unclip the top of our zipper pocket lining from the back, and then this will be your completed everything panel. I'm gonna give this a press and then set it aside. Now I'm gonna move on to assembly of the top zipper panel. So you'll need your zipper along with your pulls. If you're using a pre-made zipper, then your pulls will already be attached. I'm using zipper tape by the yard, so mine aren't. I'm gonna singe the ends of my zipper tape so they don't fray, and then slide on my pulls. Because I'm using two, I'm going to slide on one on each end. Now, if you're using a pre-made zipper, then you would trim any of the excess fabric that's above the zipper stop, and leaving about 1/2 inch of tape up there. I don't have to trim mine since mine's just a zipper by the yard. And you'll do the same to the bottom if needed. And you'll take your zipper tabs, and if you have a fabric that you would like on the exterior, then place that right sides down along the top part of your zipper. And you do that to both ends of your zipper. And then the one that you want for the lining fabric, you'll face that right side down along the back side of the zipper. And then I'm going to sew across with a 3/8 seam allowance. If you have a metal teeth, just make sure that you're not sewing over your zipper teeth quickly, as you can break a needle. And there's tips in step 95 that will help. I have a nylon one, so I can just sew right on over. And then turn your tabs out. And then you can top stitch along that seam. And then if your zipper tabs are any little bit longer than your zipper tape, you can go ahead and trim those down. And you'll take your zipper tab ends and match them. And go all the way up your zipper tape to find your center. Make sure that your zipper is not twisted. So match my ends, go up my tape, and find my centers. Now, I would recommend marking both sides of your tape. Then we'll take your top piece A exterior and find the center of the middle of the front. So the side with the curve is the part that you want to find your center to. And then take your zipper tape and match the right side of the zipper tape, so the front side of your zipper tape, to your right side of your fabric, matching that center point. And you can unzip your zipper to make it clipping around easier. And then it has you pausing your clipping when you get closer to the corner of the panel. And they want you to cut a series of 1/4 inch notches into the zipper tape to allow the tape to take to the curves a little bit more easily. I'm gonna first clip my zipper tab at the end of my panel and work up to my zipper, so I know how much zipper tape I really have to work with and need to work into that area. And then this side, I'm gonna do it the opposite way so you can see the two. Since it is okay if the tab extends a little bit beyond the end of the bag, I just wanna not have to cut into my zipper tape more than what is needed. So I have this. I just wanna help that lay a little bit more evenly. I'm gonna snip no more than that 1/4 of an inch. Come in again with my lighter and singe those areas that I cut into. This will help seal the tape. It does not need it, but it will help the zipper tape from not fraying later. You can clip that around. On one side, and then I do repeat on the other. Now you can fold and check to see if your tabs worked out to be the same length overhang, which they did. That will ensure that you have the same amount of zipper tape between your center point and your end. Now in step 105, they have you basting, and it says to start from your center and work your way around and then go and continue on the other side to ensure that you have even distribution of your zipper tape. If you have a good amount of clips, you shouldn't have a problem with starting off on one end. But if you are unsure, definitely go ahead and start from that center point and baste. Baste with a 1/8, baste around. You need to move your zipper out of the way. Make sure your needle's down. Move your zipper, lift, or move your zipper, and then you can sew. Now that I got my pressure foot out of that area, I'm gonna lift my foot and bring my zipper back, and then bring it back down. The whole time my needle was in the down position. Again, we're getting close to my zipper, so I'm going to make sure my needle's down, lift up my pressure foot, move my zipper, and then place my pressure foot back down. And then you can ensure that your zipper tabs have the same amount of overhang still. And that will ensure that your zipper was evenly distributed between your sewing. You do want to go around, make sure that you did not get any gathers or puckers within your tape. Especially when you turn it right side out. Okay. And then we are now going to take our other side of our zipper that we have, and I'm going to clip this together so that it stays out of my sewing area for when I attach the other side of the panel. So I won't be able to see it then. You'll take your piece of top A lining and place that right sides together along your curved and match up not to your tab, but to the panel. Because if you had some overhang, you're gonna have some zipper tab hanging out. And you'll pin around your make. If you would like, you could also found the middle of this to ensure that the centers all matched up. And I personally like to put a lot of clips in this area. That will ensure that you're working in small little bits and that your zipper is staying flat. And now you can sew this on with that 3/8 seam allowance. You can start from the center and then work your way around and then come back to the center and work your way the other way. I'm just gonna start from my one end because I know that my panel's even and I definitely have it clipped in place. And a zipper foot does help with this part. So now there's that. Before you go ahead and trim your seam allowance or use pinking shears around this, I would turn your bag right side out real quick and ensure that you are happy with your zipper tape all the way around your bag so that there aren't any gathers or puckers or folds in your tape, and that you are happy with your zipper tape before you trim away any of your seam allowance. So you can either take pinking shears or cut notches. I would recommend only doing it on your lining fabric. That way you don't cut into your zipper tape any more than you need to. Doing so can compromise your zipper. So I'm gonna take pinking shears to that, and then I snipped within that 1/8 seam allowance of my exterior fabric. And you can turn that right side out. Go ahead and top stitch this panel. Just ensure that your zipper is out of the way. And top stitch around with a 1/8 seam allowance. And you can give this a good press before top stitching. Just be careful with your zipper if you have a nylon one. then if your zipper tab ended up extending past your panel, and trim those so that they're even. Now the difference would be whether or not if you use zipper by the tape and how much zipper you could cut off. So they gave you a little extra wiggle room to play around just in case you weren't using the zipper by the yard. So there's that, and then you can give it a little twist, zip up. Once your panel is zipped, you're going to take those markings that you have from the pattern piece around the curve. You're going to take these markings from your pattern piece and extend those down to the other end of your zipper tape. And then you can go ahead and make those notches around this curve as we did on our other side. Once your notches are made on the bottom of your tape, with your zipper zipped, lay your main piece B, or your top main piece B. Take the center of the inner curve. You can mark the other outer center too if you would like for later. And then with it right side up, matching where your center points are on your zipper, and then flip this over so that your fabric is right sides together with the zipper, matching along that center point. And there's the right side of your zipper facing the right side of the fabric. And once you've clipped a good little bit along the straight edge, you can unzip your zipper to make working it in around the curves easier. So you just continue to clip around, and when you get to the corners, make sure that your corner markings match up. And we'll do that on the other side. And here is the piece of B fully clipped. I will say, do not try to clip this piece flat or else it will not clip right. You want to make kind of like a wall and hold your piece up and move around your fabric so that it lays around that curve. Now we're going to baste. I recommend flipping your panel over so that you're basting with your zipper side up. That will really help you when you get into this curve. And then you can definitely do it to where you sew from the middle section around and then repeat on the other half. But I'm gonna do mine from the one edge and baste around with a 1/8 seam allowance. When you get to the curves, it is good to go slow. Make sure that your fabric is straight and nothing is buckling or folding or gapping. And you can check to see how that basted one. And you can make sure that your pieces lined up from when you marked and your fabric. Now for attaching our bee lining, I'll flip it over so that you see the lining of this panel. You want to flip your bee piece so that it's right side out, so you see that. And then you'll take your top piece bee lining, have that right side down so that your right sides of fabric are together, but your right side of your lining's towards the wrong side of your zipper. And you'll match the inner circle so you can match up your square point. And match up the square points to hold that in place and even, but we're gonna clip along our inner circle, following along. I'm gonna work on your other side out. Again, it does help to not have that fabric flat and to hold it up so you can make it go around a curve. So you can make it go around a curve. Now we're gonna sew this on with that 3/8 seam allowance. And then you want to take and check your seams around your zipper on both sides, just to make sure you don't have any fold overs in your zippers or any weird odd puckers in your fabric. So that when you pull these right side out and clip to match my fabrics together, so that it makes it an easier top stitch, and that when I'm top stitching it smoothly together. I'm going to top stitch the seam around the zipper. And we're going to go in and top stitch around this joined seam, the 1/8 seam allowance. Now you can zip things up, make sure that you're happy with it. Now we can baste around our whole perimeter, keep everything tight and in place. And if your fabric is a fraying type of fabric, then you can do a zigzag stitch. And there's that all together. Now you can place this off to the side while we work on our strap. Now for our straps, the steps are the same for the handles and the crossbody strap. If you are using pre-made straps, then you can skip to step 26. Skip to step 27 if you want to add the folded part of the handle. If you don't want to do the rolled handle and just do a flat handle, then you can skip straight to step 31 if you're using prepared straps. Now I'm using webbing for my prepared straps, but I will quickly walk you through with a scrap piece of fabric. You'll have a long strip for your strapping. You'll fold that in half along your wrong side. So right here is the wrong side to create that memory creasing. Then you'll fold down to meet your center creasing, and you'll fold up also to meet your center creasing, and then you can give that a press. Then you'll fold in to conceal that raw edge to get a strap. And again, you can press that, and then you'll go ahead and top stitch along both ends with a 1/8 seam allowance, and that would get you your long strap. And you would do the same thing for your handles. Since I have pre-made straps, I was able to skip to step 27. If you prefer flat straps, then you can skip to step 131, which is attaching the straps. And go ahead and show the folded handle. So you'll find the center of your strap, and this is the same for whether or not you're doing pre-made straps or you made your straps. You'll find your center and you'll mark it, and then you'll mark down 4 inches on each of the sides. So I have my 4-inch marking, so you have a total of 8 inches along your grab handle. Now you're going to fold in half. If you have a right side, you want your right side out. Fold that. Have that, and now you'll sew from that marking to your other marking, back tacking at each start and finish. And then you'll sew with a 1/8 seam allowance. If you have a pre-made strap, you want to get on top of your previous stitching the best you can. And then if you're doing webbing, I always have to increase my tension when I'm just doing webbing itself. So if you're struggling with webbing, try messing with your tension if you are getting nesting. What your folded handle would look like, and then you'll repeat on your other one. Now we're going to attach our straps, so you'll need your 2 long side mains. We'll take one panel at a time. And from the top, you're going to mark your center, and then you're going to mark 2 1/4 inches out on each side of that marking. And those will be your placements for your handle. When you're doing the folded handle, make sure that that part is facing up where your seam is. And so ensure when you have your handle out that that is not a joined seam. And because I'm using webbing, I'm actually going to singe the edge of my webbing to seal them so they don't unravel. And now we're going to base these on with a 1/8 seam allowance. There's that one, and we'll repeat with our other panel. And now we can set these off to the side. we're gonna move on to our strap. If you aren't making a strap, you can skip to page 127 for step 165 of assembling the base and the sides. Since the pattern piece overview, I have changed my pieces a little bit. For strap pad A, I changed out one of my pieces for a 3D air mesh in order to add some comfort to it and also allow for more breathability within the strap. And my piece of 1.5 millimeter foam is going to be in for the middle of the stabilizer just to add some cushion on that strap padding. And then I changed out one of my pieces of B to a print versus having two of the black pieces. For whatever piece that won't get the piece B directly attached straight to it first, you'll attach your fleece interfacing. This is my 3D air mesh. So the part that goes against your skin, like that will be the part that will go around on your shoulder first. I'm not going to use a feasible fleece, so you can if you want it, because I'm just using a sew-in foam. You can if you want to take a piece of double-sided tape and stick that on there. I'm just going to sandwich it in there later. I'm going to place this off to the side like that, and I won't be double-sided taping it. It'll be okay. Then you'll take your two pieces of strap pad B and place those right sides together, and along your two short edges, you're gonna clip and then sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. And then you can trim your seam allowance corners if you would like. And then turn right side out. And you'll give it a press. And you can top stitch those two sides with a 1/8 seam allowance. And you want a piece that looks like this. Those are those two raw edges. And then you'll take your strap pad A that does not have the interfacing on it. I'm gonna find the center along the long ends. So on my raw edge side, I can fold that in half and find those centers. Match that up. You can match up your centers, points, and then baste in place. Sleeve there. Now the next steps will walk you through how to do binding if you're making your own binding, which is very similar to the process of how we did our strap, with folding it in half, making that memory crease, folding it in half again, and memory creasing. And then you'll go ahead and take your binding and you'll sew along that first crease and you'll sew around. But I am going to go ahead and fold over elastic and go around my edges. So because I'm doing that, I'm just going to take my pad and place it to where my foam is sandwiched in between my layers and that the right sides are facing outwards. I'm going to clip around. And then I'm going to baste around with a 1/8 seam allowance. That so far. And now this is 3/4 of an inch. So I don't really have thick seams, so I don't need much to go over it. Just gonna go around and clip. And then because I'm using this, I'm gonna sew with a 1/4 seam allowance. You can definitely go ahead and clip all the way around. I'm just so used to doing it without clipping on the small piece. It will also allow me to get a really nice tight fit around the curve. Now, coming back past to your point where you started your bias tape, I'm gonna leave a little extra overhang so that you can fold back a little bit to hide those raw edges. Strap will go on there. This will be the side that goes across your shoulder. Now you can place this off to the side and work on your actual strap. And then you'll take your strap, either your pre-made strap or the strap you made earlier. And then your 2 swivel hooks and your slider. Because I used webbing, again, I'm going to singe the ends of my webbing to help it prevent from fraying. If you made your strap, you don't need to do this. I'll take one end of your webbing and slip it into your slider and up over the bar and back down through the other end of the slider. You'll bring the end of the webbing back towards the other side. And we're going to fold over about 3/8 of an inch. Slide that closest to the bars you can get and work with your pressure foot. And because I'm using webbing, I don't really need that box stitch. So I'm just going to top stitch across here with a 1/8 seam allowance. If you are using cotton or major strap just in general, a box stitch could be helpful. Because of the thick layers, I'm going to add what I like to substitute in as a hump jumper, which is just layers of vinyl. So there's that part of the strap. And then on your other end, take one of your swivel hooks and slide it on, making sure that your handle is not twisted. And then slide, this right here is the back side where I folded it over. Slide my webbing through that strap and then back and in to the other side. That then makes that adjustable strap. So on my other end, I can take my remaining swivel and slip it on, and then again fold back that little bit. And if you would like, you can do box stitching, or you can just sew across. Your strap, and then on this straight part, not the looped part, you can take your padding and thread that through. Make sure that your top part of your glider is the same side that this pack is sitting on. This is the other side, is the part that you have against your shoulder. So then this will be ready for the final bag, and you set this aside. Now for our D-rings, now if you again aren't making the strap, the crossbody strap, then you won't need to make these. You'll take 2 of your pieces of D-rings and place those right sides together. And again, your long, and against your long ends, we'll clip and then sew with a 3/8 seam allowance. Go ahead and get that going with my second. Again, sew with that 3/8. And then you turn them right side out. You have 2. And you can take your D-rings and slide them on and fold over. And then you can clip at the ends. And then baste together. Now I want you to take the top panel that has a zipper on it, and you'll find your center of your 2 short edges. And then place your D-ring centered on that marking. And clip in place. And make sure they're facing in towards your bag. And then we'll baste in place. I'm going to place this aside for our assembly of the base and the sides. Now, for the assembly of the base and the sides, this method of construction will involve never sewing within the 3/8 seam allowance at any of the bottom corners. It is suggested that you read through the entire section before beginning. In this case, you can also watch through it before you sew yours. If you are struggling with the construction, it does help to grab a few smaller pieces of cotton squares and practice construction with those. Once you've done a few, you understand the method and it will come together fairly quickly. Now, we're going to start on the bottom edges of our short panels first. And we're going to mark 3/8 of an inch up and in. So you'll draw a little box on your corners, and you'll do that on both of your short panels bottoms. Do it on the wrong side of the fabric. And then you'll repeat that on both of the bottom corners of your long panels. Remember, we're starting this process off with just the lining part of it. So here's our long side on the wrong side of the fabric. On the bottom edge, marking that 3/8 of an inch from the side and the bottom. My other long edge is my everything panel. Now that you're done with your 4 sides, you'll grab your base lining. And again, on the wrong side, you'll mark your 3/8 of an inch, but instead of the bottom 2 corners, this time we'll do all 4 corners. So there's that. The base has all 4 corners marked. Now, place my base off to the side. Grab one of your long side panel linings. Have that right side up. And then grab one of your short sides and place that right sides together, matching up that side. You can use a pin to mark where your 3/8 of a seam is to really keep those fabrics together. When you do your exterior, you won't want to pin it though. But you can get used to it while you're doing your lining. We're gonna pin or clip up our side. So let's just start at your marking. I'm sewing with a 3/8 seam allowance, starting again on your marking. Sew up and then back tack back. Do not sew past your marking though. I'll use hemostats real quick just to help pull on the elastic and keep my finger out of that area. Now, mark over, and we'll repeat on the other side. Before we go there, you see I did not sew past that marking. We're gonna do our opposite side. Take our other side panel, other short side panel, and again match up those 3/8 inch markings. Okay, match up markings. Match up your markings, and then clip up along the side of the side panel. I'm going to start at the marking and then sew up, sewing with a 3/8 seam allowance. I'm going to back tack, but sew up first and then back tack back, not going past the marking. And again, once I get to my elastic pocket, I'm going to grab it with hemostats just to help keep the fabric straight. Again, do not sew past the marking. I can kind of open up and see that one straight path. We'll be working with our base, so your piece with the 4 corners mapped out. You'll take one side of your panel, so this is that long piece with our 2 short edges attached. Go from one side and you'll kind of flip back, slash peel back, however you want to phrase that seam. And you'll take and match your long side of your base with long side of your long panel, punching in that 3/8 of an inch corner. And this time we're working on this way, so you'll match those, and then you'll clip along your bottom edge, and we'll end up doing the same thing on the other side, peeling back those layers. You can stick in your other panel, and again pinning those points in place. We'll clip the remaining part of our panel. And we'll start at that 3/8 marking, making sure that our side panel's up out of the way and that we're only starting at the point. And sewing with a 3/8 seam allowance. Okay, I'm going to sew forward and then back tack a little bit, but not past the point. And then sew along with a 3/8 seam allowance. To the other end, make sure that corner's up out of the way, and then stop directly on the point. Do not sew any farther than it, and then back tack. And make sure that you didn't get anything else in that seam. And once that's attached, I have this. So you have your long and then your pin at the bottom, your base at the bottom. Now we're going to take our second long side and we're going to attach it to the bottom of our base. So place those right sides together, making sure that the bottom of your panel is on the base. Match those points. And then clip along the edge. And I will sew from marking to marking with a 3/8 seam allowance. And remember, starting and stopping at the markings. So now, once you've done that, again, stopping and starting, so you have those little peelable back corners, you'll now have this long T. You'll have a long side panel, your base, another long side panel, a short panel, and then the other short side panel. We'll attach our short sides to the base. Start with this side, folding it over. And again, folding up that seam. And matching that point. And then clipping along our edge. Okay. And again, only sewing, make sure to keep your other long panel out of the way. Only sewing between those points. Go slow, make sure that your fabrics are straight and flat. Okay, and then that's the one side that we just constructed. And we'll repeat for our other short side, matching to our base. Short side to the base, peeling back the corner, placing in our edge. Okay. And again, sewing between point to point. other corner. You'll have that with a flat open, and we'll finish off the lining with connecting our sides and repeating that process. This time we'll sew all the way from one end down to the point. Starting at the point, backpacking after I sewed up a little bit, and then sew all the way up to the end. That corner. Now our final corner, again, peeling back. Again, so from point up. Final corner. So that would be inside of your bag. There's the inside of your bag once you have your final corner done. Now we can repeat for our exterior, which I'm just going to sew through without walking through the steps. If you need a refresher, go ahead and re-watch the first part of the lining. I'm just going to quickly sew the exterior. Alright, so here's the finished exterior. That's all put together with your corners. And so the finished lining looks the same construction wise. You're going to take your exterior and you're going to turn it right side out. So there's outside. Now if you have a preference of which your front panel is versus your back panel, to where like I don't, because mine are exactly the same, then a preference on where your panels fall. Like for me, if I had, for my everything panel, if I had a exterior that I wanted the front side, I would put it on the opposite panel. So let's just say this was my front. I would put my everything panel on the opposite. So it would go on my back side. I'm gonna clip around my exterior because I placed my lining inside my bag so that my things are wrong sides together, so that you'll see the right sides of the fabric once everything's pinned together. I'm gonna clip around, and I'm also going to open up these seams to lay them flat and match against those. There's that clipped around. Now we're gonna sew around with a 1/4 seam allowance, and as you're sewing, make sure that your handles are laying flat. They're also out of your sewing area. Start one, and we're gonna sew around with a 1/4 seam allowance. When you sew over your handles, you can reinforce them with a few stitches. I'm gonna go ahead and shift over to a 1/8 inch of a seam allowance, and I'm gonna back tack across it. And then sew with a 1/4. Now, if you're struggling sewing your bag like that, you can definitely sew your bag in a loop from the lining side. So that way it loops around your machine. You can sew like this, and this is actually the better way to sew. I just wanted to show you those handles so that way you could really see when you came up to them. Oh, this is where you want to make sure that your handle's down. Now, this is why I sewed the bag the other way at first, so you could see I'm coming up to a handle. You want to make sure that one, it is straight out of your, straight and flat, so when you sew over it, sews right. Okay. And then you can reinforce in that area. This is again where you would attach your binding if you were making your binding, and attach it to your lining side and sewing along that first seam. I'm going to actually use 1 inch fold over elastic. I'm going to skip to turning my bag where the lining is facing out. And there's our bag with our lining facing out. And take that top panel, and on the lining side, mark your center points along each of your ends. And we're going to mark our center points of our long panels and our short panels on all of our sides. And find which panel you want to be your back panel. So if you did a color blocking on just one panel, that would be your front, and your plain would be your back. Again, my bag doesn't matter. And whatever side is your back side is what you're going to match the straight edge to. So match those center points. And I'm going to clip across this. And then you can come in here and unzip your panel. If you do not do this, then you're going to have trouble getting into your bag later. And then you can match up the opposite side centers. And continue to clip around your bag, matching your center points. And you're going to clip just until you get to those corners, because those corners are going to be eased in. Okay, did my 2 long ends. Now I'm gonna do my short. Setting up the center points. And then clip in out. And when you get to those corners, you're gonna have a little bit left over. You're gonna clip as close as you can to those corners. And working down that fabric. And you're just gonna snip the corner. You don't have to snip too much, because you rather snip a little bit and then have to go back and re-snip, but then snip too much and not be able to re-go back. Once you snip, that corner will, or that now rounded corner, will be able to work its way into the bag. then there's this corner. Can trim that a little bit. Now your bag's all clipped around. If you were doing the bias tape that you would need to fold over, it would be on this outer edge. Now I'm gonna sew around a 3/8 seam allowance. That can be a little tricky to maneuver, so make sure you go slow and maneuver your bag as you go. You might find it easier to sew around those corners first and then come back and do your sew around. Now, before you do your binding, I would recommend to go in and turn out your bag to make sure that you are happy with your stitching and that you caught everything and that you don't have any major odd puckers within your seams. Now you can go around and trim your seam allowance down by half, all but around your areas where your webbing is and your D-rings are if you have them. Okay. Now it is the final binding time before your bag is finished. If you had your binding that was on your lining, you would just go ahead, take it up, fold it over. I am using a 1-inch fold over elastic. Clip some to keep it in place. Okay, and then I'm going to go around and sew just about back where we started. So we're gonna leave some excess so that we can fold back and under. And you'll go around, make sure that you caught everything before turning it out. So then there's that, and we'll turn this right side out. Corner. Okay. And then duffel is all done. And here is our finished Cascade Duffle. I hope you enjoyed making this and enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please go ahead and like and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for sewing with me today. Happy sewing, everyone. Bye.